Hello everybody, today I am going to talk about my favorite or second favorite, depending on the day, book of all time, that is The Lord of the Rings, a series that I have a long, beloved history with. Sorry, I'm distracted because Callie is trying to eat the plant. No, don't eat the plant. Hey, don't eat the plant. No, Callie? No. California? Okay, hold on a second. No, you can't eat the plant. You can't eat the plant. Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings is one of my favorite series of all time. I have read it a ton. Try to count, let's see, I'll count on camera. That I'm sure will be good for YouTube, right? So let's see, I read it once in 5th grade, read it again. That was when the movies first came out, Fellowship of the Ring first came out. I read it again when Return of the King came out a couple years later. That's twice. I read it once more in high school. I read it once in college. I read it, that's when I heard that Christopher Lee read it. Well, I heard this before, but I tried the Christopher Lee, which is he used to read it once a year. I didn't quite have his prowess, but I did read it twice then in graduate school. So that's 6 times. And then during an internship, I read it again. That's 7. So this is my 8th read-through of The Lord of the Rings, which I know is kind of nothing compared to some people who are really dedicated. But for me, I shouldn't say pretty sure. This is the book I've read the most in my life. All this to say, when I was thinking about making a video, I was like, what can I say about Lord of the Rings? You know, it's my 8th time reading it. Besides that, everyone in the world has, or at least knows of Lord of the Rings. I probably don't need to do a review on it. Plus, it would just be me gushing. So, what this really is going to be is just reflections upon my read on this. Just some random things that I thought that was unique this time around, or that I'd forgotten, or that I always love to return to. Hopefully, it's enjoyable to you guys. If you like this, I can do it for both Two Towers and Return of the King when I finish them. I'm about halfway through Two Towers as I record this. But also, if you don't, let me know that too, but like in a nice way, so I know not to make those videos. Anyway, let's get going. So first observation, I always seem to forget, or at least not until I get there, do I remember how long the story takes place in the Shire. And I don't mean page length, because actually it's not that bad. It's not bad, it's great. But I mean, like, they're not in the Shire too long, but in, like, book time, it's like something like 23, 24 years from the first sentence until Frodo leaves, because Frodo is just becoming a man in Hobbit years. I think it's 33, right, when they become of age, so to speak. But then it's not till he's 50 that he leaves on his journey. And then, so I guess that's 17 years. There, I can do math. And so much happens in that time. Gandalf does so much. It's just the time period from the beginning to the end is always something that's surprising to me. And the intensity of the planning that went into it. In the movie, definitely, like, it seems like everything's happening one after another, and that's to really give it narrative thrust. Like, I don't think it'd be a good idea to have, like, 17-year, like, timestamp or anything like that. So, not a critique at all. It's just something that I enjoy and love while I'm reading this book. Speaking of the Shire, I always want to give a shout-out to Fatty Bolger. Actually, 2 hobbits. One, Fatty Bolger, who is kind of the 5th hobbit, so to speak. He helps them, the conspiracy of the hobbits who are helping Frodo. I'm going to go with him, with Merry, Pippin, Sam, and then obviously Frodo. But he doesn't leave the Shire. He's actually the decoy, so to speak, to be Mr. Underhill or be fake Frodo in Tookland. So he also, by the way, has a near-death experience with the Black Rider. So he's a hero in its own right, but most people don't know about him if they haven't read the book. He's not in the movie at all, but Fatty Bolger, I see you. The other hobbit that needs a great shout-out that is in the movie but gets real short shrift is Farmer Maggot.
You've been into Farmer Maggot's crop!
He gets a much larger part in the book, and he's very respected by not just hobbits, but even Tom Bombadil. He's this very wise old man, and he, again, defends the hobbits and hides Frodo and Sam for a time from the riders and risks his own neck, actually, driving them to Buckleberry Ferry. So, a very, very brave hobbit that, again, doesn't really get his due in the movie, and in fact is kind of like a negative, kind of comedic, but villain, none the same. But Farmer Maggot, pretty great. That also reminds me, again, staying in the Shire, I always forget that actually Frodo and Sam miss the first Ringwraith getting to Hobbiton by a couple hours. They leave in the morning, and by mid-morning, or maybe it's noon, Sam has to go back to give the key to Hobbiton to his dad, the old gaffer, and he overhears the discussion that the old gaffer has with the Ringwraith. So it's literally as close as possible to them getting caught, but they don't. They continue and they stay out of the way of the Ringwraith. And that actually reminds me, because this is addressed earlier, because one of the reasons they leave, or later, because one of the reasons they leave so late, we found out that Butterbird didn't send a letter that Gandalf gave him to send to Frodo to tell him to leave earlier. But this is also this is a wider theme through the whole book that is downplayed, I think, rightly in the movies, but is still a large part of Fellowship of the Ring. And that's this idea of good powers in the world moving and acting mysteriously. And it's actually much more, in my reading, mystical rather than religious, or particularly a reflection of Tolkien's Catholic faith or anything like that. But there's just this idea that, yes, there's darkness moving in the world, but there's also goodness that is working in the world, and not people doing good things, although of course that is a major theme here, individual deeds keeps the darkness at bay, but also that there is this mysterious working in the universe of good rising to meet the evil. And so this is talked about a couple of times by how did Frodo even get the ring? Why did Bilbo get the ring? This is a part that's left in the movies, you were meant to have it, and that's an encouraging thought. But that's much more prominent in the books. Why they escape the Old Forest, why Tom Bombadil likes them. Why they leave just barely, why Gandalf, in a offhanded thing to Radagast, is able to escape Orthanc to help them here. So there's all kinds of things. Gandalf being sent back, spoilers, obviously it's not in this book, but there's definitely this strong theme of an unseen narrative or unseen force pushing things towards good in this book. Want to give a shout out to good old Sam as well. Sam gets a lot of great stuff in the movie as well, obviously, but even more so in the book. Sam, in small ways, keeps showing his courage and fiery passion, especially when it concerns Frodo and his well-being, or the well-being of the Shire. And it's stated several times, his bravery. In fact, he is the spy that allows Merry and Pippin to be able to come on the journey, really, because they plan with him. Even before he's caught in the garden, if you read A Conspiracy Unmasked closely, Sam was gathering information on Gandalf and what Frodo was doing and how to help him in this quest, because as a friend he knew that he needed help, which is really, really cool. That's dangerous. He thought Gandalf could turn him into a frog, which obviously he would never do. But also, even in bigger ways than that, Old Man Willow, the only one of the hobbits in the Old Forest that sort of get that fight against Old Man Willow, or is able to naturally shake off the influence of Old Man Willow, is Sam. So he's not just loyal, as sometimes that's kind of his overriding attribute. He's very brave, and he's tough. He's mentally very strong. He's got good fortitude. And I think that should be mentioned a little more. One of those instances I also love is the spy, I'm blanking on his name for a moment, in Bree. Yeah, so Bill Ferny. I was close. He's sort of the dark friend, to use Wheel of Time's term, but the spy in Bree. Sam actually throws a apple at him and hits him square in the face, because hobbits are supposed to be really good at throwing stuff, which I really love. And also I think that's kind of I'm not sure, I think Peter Jackson probably alludes to that when Pippin gets hit in the face for second breakfast in the movies. I like to think that that's a reference to Sam throwing an apple at Bill. Another fun reference that I saw, this is at the Barrow Downs, which obviously is not part in the movie, but it lives a little bit, and I just caught this read through, that the song, or incantation, so to speak, that the Barrow-wight sings actually is mentioned in the movies by Gollum. Gollum sort of mumbles it to himself. So this is the part that says this, and then I'll clip in where Gollum says it. Cold be hand and heart and bone, and cold be sleep under stone. Never more to wake on stony bed, never till the sun fails and the moon is dead. In the black wind the stars shall die, and still on gold here let them lie, till the dark lord lifts his hand over dead sea and withered land.
Who are you?
Mustn't ask us, not its business.
Gandalf told me you were one of the river folk.
Cold be heart and hand and bone, and cold be travellers far from home.
He said your life was a sad story.
They do not see what lies ahead when sun has failed and moon is dead.
At the same time I'm reading this, by the way, for the first time, I'm reading like in conjunction as a partner piece, the Silmarillion. I read it before on its own, but now this will be the second time I read it, and also, again, I'm reading it at the same time as Lord of the Rings. And that does draw some really cool parallels. One of them, speaking of Tom Bombadil, is I'll back up. So the creation story, if you've never read it, in the Silmarillion is about Eru, or as the elves call him, Iluvatar. He's kind of the god figure, so to speak, in this world. To create the world, he actually sings. And through that song, he creates these ideas of what the world could be. And the Ainur, who are kind of like the other spirits that are around Iluvatar, they're not as powerful. But they are his servants, so to speak, and they also join this song and basically follow this music. And eventually, through all of this, is how the world is created, which I think is a cool creation myth. But also, it's very interesting thinking of Tom Bombadil in the Fellowship of the Ring, that anytime that he works his magic, he sings. And it is that singing that changes the natural world around him, whether that's with Old Man Willow when he sings to him, whether it's the Barrow-wights when he tells them to go to sleep. His power is in song, which has a very, very strong implication and reflection in the creation story. So I just thought that was cool, reading these two back to back. Definitely jumped out at me. While the whole world, we talk about Tolkien's world building, right? It's amazing. He created languages, he's created landscapes that are so rich, and ecological data and historical data and genealogy and all this stuff. Like, without doubt, Middle-earth feels very lived in and real and a breathing, living world. Completely true. And in many ways, people, for some reason, hold that against other authors that maybe don't take as much time in doing that. I think wrongly. But also it's interesting, in all of Tolkien's world building, he maintains the same measurements of time as we do in our world. He still has a 12-month year, he still has a consistent lunar calendar, and he even uses our 7-day week with the same names, like Monday or Tuesday or Thursday. It's referenced, and so is September. Sam, after coming out of Lothlorien, references that the moon is not quite right. It shouldn't be a new moon anymore. So referencing sort of this lunar calendar idea. So that's consistent in this world. Also, if you remember, when Frodo wakes up, it's October the 24th, if you ought to know. That's what Gandalf says, but it's October, which is weird. October, the name of it is actually 8th month, octo. So it comes from Latin, which is not really a real language in this world. Can you guys see Callie? She's just sitting right there. She's like my director right now, licking her paw. Another thing I recognized and really loved in this read-through was the use of the names of Aragorn. More so than any other character, because lots of characters have a lot of different names. Tolkien uses Aragorn's name in very particular ways to convey things. So, for example, the hobbits meet him as Strider, and they call him that the rest of the books, even on into Return of the King. But at times he's called Elfriend, especially in Rivendell, or the Dunedain. I think he's also called that in Rivendell, and that's like a very important part of his identity as someone who is from the north and grew up in Rivendell. Then, of course, most importantly, at least for the literal return of the king, his name is Aragorn, son of Arathorn, in the line of Isildur. So all of this it's just very interesting. Even in like the actual words on the page, he being Tolkien, will sometimes say Aragorn and sometimes say Strider. Normally Strider is sort of like his like personal relationship with people. That's why Frodo always calls him that. That's like he's very close to him. Aragorn is normally a more regal title, like when he's in the halls of Edoras, or obviously when he comes to Minas Tirith. So and again, this isn't just like people calling him that. It's actually in the mode of narrative, which I think is very, very interesting. Another thing that I love that recognized this time that hadn't really registered before is I forget that in the Council of Elrond, they actually reference what I hear a lot of people say, which is, why didn't they just like sail the ring and drop it into the ocean? That's actually like talked about in the Council of Elrond. And their reason basically is, one, we don't know what dwells in the deep. There could be dark things down there. And two, that with the ring, they eventually would find a way back to shore. And sure, it could be ages and ages in the future, but while that survives, Sauron would also survive. And so they felt guilty about passing that guilt and that burden onto other generations, and they wouldn't do that. They took it upon themselves. Which I think is very noble, and also our world can learn a little something about that. I don't know, in let's say climate change. Another thing I always pay close attention to this when I reread the series. Boromir, his character is actually given a lot more time of day. Well, I shouldn't say that. The movie actually does a pretty good job with the time that is given to Boromir to make the ending really strong. But also, one of his most noble attributes, I think, is in the past when there's this huge blizzard. He like suggests and then does himself sort of barreling through the snow to make sure that there's a way for the hobbits so they don't die to get through the snow. Just a very noble man, but it is also very interesting that after Gandalf dies in Lothlorien is really where his fear starts to manifest, and through that fear that the ring grabs hold of him. Another observation, the Nazgul, or the flying ring wraiths, the winged wraiths, whatever you want to call them, are actually in Fellowship of the Ring. I forget that Legolas actually shoots out a steed underneath a ring wraith. They're still secretive, they're not being used openly, but in the cover of darkness, it follows the company on the Anduin, the Great River, before they get to the Ergonath. Which I think I totally forgot about. I'm glad that they sort of kept it for the second one. There's that big reveal in the Dead Marshes in the movie. But yeah, so the only other observation, and I always think about this, is the lack of action in The Lord of the Rings. Obviously, lots of exciting things happen, but like as far as actually describing battle, very, very limited. For example, that whole huge battle in the Mines of Moria during the flight to the Bridge of Khazad-dûm is described in one paragraph. You know, that whole, like, what is it, 15 minutes, 15-minute battle in Fellowship of the Ring is very brief here. This is how it's described. How many orcs there were, the company could not count. The affray was large, but the orcs were dismayed by the fierceness of the defense. Legolas shot 2 through the throat. Gimli hewed the legs from under another that had sprung up on Balin's tomb. Boromir and Aragorn slew many. When 13 had fallen, the rest fled shrieking, leaving the defenders unharmed, except for Sam, who had a scratch along the scalp. A quick duck had saved him, and he had felled his orc, a sturdy thrust with his barrow blade. A fire was smoldering in his brown eyes that would have made Ted and Sandyman step backwards, if he had seen it. That's literally it for that battle, and I actually really appreciate this mode of storytelling, much more than sort of the battle descriptive, heavy descriptive sort of modern fantasy. Not that I don't like it, I read lots of books that have it, but with that like really described like, and then, you know, Gandalf lifted his staff to parry, and then counter thrust his sword into the chest of, you know, that kind of like very descriptive of how everything is happening. I actually like this very short storytelling method of action. Leaves a lot to the imagination and the richness of the rest of the text, I think. I don't want to say makes up for it, because it's not like it's a negative, but I think that's the strength, and that's what I want to read more of rather than particulars of battle. So that's my thoughts on the first Lord of the Rings. Hopefully this was enjoyable to you guys, liked kind of hearing my rereads of the Fellowship of the Ring. I also want to say highly, highly, highly recommend this special edition illustrated by Alan Lee. It is absolutely gorgeous. I have a whole video on it, but I just love it. It enhances, again, someone who's read this 8 times now, it enhanced my reading and was enjoyable to the uttermost, and even more so because of this special edition. So I would highly recommend it. I would also highly recommend getting the Atlas of Middle-earth. It's by Karen Wynne Fonstad. I'll have this linked in the description below. But it is a much more detailed map book that just gives gorgeous, gorgeous overlays of what things look like, says a little bit about the environment. Obviously the maps are really fun that are included in Lord of the Rings, but they're still limited, and this one has far off sort of all-world maps, as well as like day-by-day descriptions of the moving of the company, and especially after the breaking of the Fellowship, highlighting Frodo and Sam's journey, the days that they are going certain places, and then the rest of the Fellowship as well, as they are further to the west. So this is just, I just loved this, and popping this open when I had a question about geography, or where is, Weathertop in reference to the Emyn Muil, all this kind of fun stuff. Where's Lorien and Mirkwood? What's the distance between them? All these kind of like things that you're kind of think of. This has a great, it has answers, and it's a great resource. So I'll have this linked below, and you should definitely check it out. That's the end. I've said a lot. Let me know if you like this video and everything that you want to say about Fellowship of the Ring. As always, first in, last out.